Yeah, so in my meditation, I got a inspiration to um, just do a lightweight invocation. So I want to ask, to the greatest extent that serves the highest good, I invite those humble messengers of the law of one, known as Ra, as well as any Confederation entities who are aware of our gathering, to support this study and support us all being benefited by this study and from the light generated from our gathering to radiate out into the world to serve the earth in its ascension. So may it be. Okay, the study is open. We have a little over an hour, and we're going to try to cover session one. Does anybody feel excited to read?
Sure.
I love to read. Go, May.
Go ahead, May. You can just read the whole first 1.0.
1.0. Okay. Session 1, January 15th, 1981. I am Ra. I have not spoken through this instrument before. We had to wait until she was precisely tuned as we send a narrow band vibration. We greet you in the love and in the light of our infinite creator. We have watched your group. We have been called to your group, for you have a need for the diversity of experiences and channeling, which go with a more intensive, or as you might call it, advanced approach to the system of studying the patterns of the illusions of your body, your mind, and your spirit, which you call seeking the truth. We hope to offer you and your spirit, which you call, we hope to offer you a somewhat different slant upon the information which is always and ever the same. The Confederation of Planets in the service of the infinite creator has only one important statement. That statement, my friends, as you know, is all things, all of life, all of the creation is part of one original thought. We will exercise each channel if we are able to. The reception of our beam is a somewhat more advanced feat than some of the more broad vibration channels operated by other members for more introductory and intermediate work. Let us for a moment consider thought. What is it, my friends, to take thought? Took you then thought today? What thoughts did you think today? What thoughts were part of the original thought today? In how many of your thoughts did the creation abide? Was love contained? And was service freely given? You are not part of a material universe. You are part of a thought. You are dancing in a ballroom in which there is no material. You are dancing thoughts. You move your body, your mind, and your spirit in somewhat eccentric patterns, for you have not completely grasped the concept that you are part of the original thought. We would at this time transfer to an instrument known as Dawn. I am Ra. I am Ra. And again, with this instrument, we are close to initiating a contact, but are having difficulty penetrating a certain mental tension and distraction that is somewhat characteristic of this channel. We will therefore describe the type of vibration which is being sent. The instrument will find us entering the energy field at a slight angle towards the back of the top of the head in a narrow but strong area of intensity. We are not able to offer any conditioning due to our own transmitting limitations. Therefore, if the instrument can feel this particular effect He may then speak our thoughts as they come to him. We will again attempt this contact. I am Ra. Then there was another pause. This instrument is resisting our contact. However, we assure her that we are satisfied that contact with the one known as Dawn is not at this time preferable to that instrument. We will therefore move on to the one known as Leonard. Again, we caution the instrument that this is a narrow band communication, which is felt as a vibration entering the aura. We will now transfer this contact. I am Ra. I am Ra. We greet you once more in the love and the light of our infinite creator. We ask that you be patient with us, for we are a difficult channel to receive. However, we may perhaps add some dimensions to your understanding. At this time, we would be glad to attempt to speak to any subject or question which those entities in the room may have potential use in requesting.
Thank you, May. Yeah, so let's pause there. That's a lot. Just right off the bat. I believe the context here is that for this first session, if I understand correctly, they hadn't set up, of course, to channel Ra. This was a surprise contact. The LL research group had been doing channeling work for quite a while now, but it was of a different type of channeling. And I think what was happening was Carla had a student or was working with somebody to teach channeling, and Ra came in. And so there's people in the room, including this character Leonard, who who aren't normally in these sessions as it moves forward. And yeah, it all just kind of came together. So that's interesting. Just that Ra just sort of showed up. Surprise, I'm here. Any questions or comments about that first part?
That's related to something that I think is fascinating about this one as well, just 1.0. Aaron pointed out, I think a couple years ago in one of our studies, maybe it was the second time through, that this is the only time that Ra speaks to the group without being first asked a question. So it's the only words from Ra that are not a response, which, hearing later in the material that Ra, the extent to which Ra respected the free will of the group, that's really interesting, that it was like its only response except for this. So that stands out to me.
I really try to get into the mindset of what it would really be like to be in that room when Ra does come through for the first time, and just how amazing that must have been. And just, I can't even imagine just that moment. And I try to get there when I'm feeling uninspired, or sometimes I second guess all of the law of one and then go back and I'm like, no, I shouldn't be second guessing this. But yeah, just that moment of the very first contact, I like to think about and get in that headspace of just pure amazement and that joy they probably felt.
I just want to make a process point, and then it seems like Scott's going to speak. Just if at some point there's a lot of interest to speak all at the same time, we can take a stack in terms of like raise your hand, like your physical hand, or you also can, in reactions down at the bottom, you can like click a thing to raise your hand. So we can take a stack if there becomes a lot of like, I want to speak, because that can help us kind of relax and like, okay, I know that I'm going to get a turn. So yeah, if anybody wants to request a stack, feel free to put it in the chat. And or for now, let's just see how it goes. And it seems like Scott wants to say something.
Scott has a question. And thanks. That's a good suggestion, BJ. I think that'll work well. Yeah, wow. I feel like we've talked about when I'm going to ask a question. We've talked about it before, and I can't, but for some reason now it's just like I'm still like confused by this, which is often amusing to me. I'm just going to read that the part. It's in the second paragraph. We have watched your group. We've been called to your group, for you have a need for the diversity of experiences and channeling which go with a more intensive, or as you might call it, advanced approach to the system of studying the patterns of the illusions of your body, your mind, and your spirit, which you call seeking the truth. So that phrase, the patterns, I'm like, what are they saying right there? The patterns of the illusions of your body, your mind, and your spirit, which you call seeking the truth. Does anybody have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can share a little bit. I mean, your question is such a relevant question from my perspective. It makes a lot of sense why you would ask that question. And it ties into a thing further down, where they say, you are not part of a material universe. You are part of a thought. You are dancing thoughts, and so the reason why it connects is because, I think for most of us and for most of humans on the earth, that's a very different perspective than we live from. We really are convinced of the solidity of the physical environment that we exist within, not only the reality of our bodies, but even the identification of the self as the body. And so when they say, the system of studying the patterns of the illusions of your body, your mind, and your spirit, I think that's a little clue. The illusions of, and it's a paradox, y'all, because it's not like these things don't exist. It's not like we don't have a body or a mind or a spirit. Mm-hmm. It's just that, they're not exactly what we tend to think that they are. And I think that's the illusion part is, we think of the body as this. A lot of people think of the body as the self, or the body mind as the self. Mm-hmm. And even the body, mind, and spirit as the self, which on a certain level is true, but all is one, and it's all the creator, and everything that's happening is part of the original thought. And for seekers, what is a seeker? What are we seeking? We're seeking to know what reality is. We're seeking to know what the true nature of what we are and what we're experiencing. That's the seeking of truth. And so Ra is offering what they call an advanced approach. They're bringing sixth density teachings. They're bringing the teachings of the law of one. And these teachings are different than other Confederation members who have been transmitting for a long time. And there's a lot of really excellent, channeled material. And of course, some mix, but a lot of that channel material is more fourth and fifth density teachings. And Ra's bringing in a more advanced approach, meaning they're bringing, the teachings that come from beyond the paradoxes, from when the paradoxes are resolved, a more advanced approach. So yeah, that's my comment. I'm curious to hear what Diana has to say.
Ooh. Just always want to go down this rabbit hole. I wasn't expecting to do it so quickly. Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, Aaron. I think Ra is finding a really subtle, profound way of saying, hey, there's like way more to this picture than meets the eye. I think the big question is, are we evolving, or are we having the experience of evolving in a universe of singularity, where in reality there's no time and space, but we live in the experience of a universe that's been distorted away from this one thing that is not having experience into many things, so that there can be an observer and that which is observed, an experiencer and that which is experienced. Like the whole realm of experience is illusion. And I think Ra is basically saying, like, you guys are having the experience of patterns of thoughts within the illusion that you call seeking. And it's very real to us, and it's the most important thing that there is, right? So not to discredit it. But I think Ra got really deep really fast there. And in terms of, just to speak to what you said, Scott, or no, I think it was BJ who said that was the only time, that session was the only time that Ra spoke without initially being addressed. Some of you may know that Carla had been practicing, had allowed herself to go into trance prior to this moment of contact, when she was asked to channel the deceased wife of a friend of hers. And so her many years of practice channeling, plus her willingness to go into trance, probably constituted for Ra, it's my guess that that constituted a bit of an agreement to having that experience. And I can't guess at what else was involved there, but I feel like somehow there was probably still a lot of integrity and non-free will violation in that outreach. That's all.
Yeah, I just want to tag on real quick. My perspective is that we learn later in the material that, we get a couple clues about the makeup of the group. There's Ra teaching and transmitting, and then there's the three, Don, Jim, and Carla, who are primarily the group who are doing the reception and translation of the message. And we learn about their origins and of density, and that they've worked together before. Those three souls have worked together many times before. And they don't. It certainly doesn't say this for sure. So this is just my opinion. But I believe that the three of those souls came in with a very clear plan, pre-incarnative program to do this work. And so that Ra would show up right when Carla was, doing this work that Diana just mentioned. It seems like that was the sort of like agreed upon moment, or agreed upon, kind of like opportunity that was set up even before they had incarnated, before they were born, to get started on this transmission, this work. And again, that's just my sense, my hunch.
Sean, you had your hand raised at one point and then you put it down. Do you want to speak?
I just have a question. So like the very first communication, Ra talks about thought and asks like, what is it to take thought? Took you then thought today? And like, I'm thinking like, what does he mean? Like, I feel like I'm thinking like is daydreaming thinking, or like, is he talking about some deeper, like, what is this thought that it's so important that it's your first message and you're talking about like, did you take thought? And I don't really fully know what is his definition of thought. Like, does anyone like, I don't know, like, does someone else know a little bit more about what he's talking about?
I have thoughts about that. Anybody else want to chime in? I'll go. Okay. So from my perspective, the capacity to take thought is the canvas of the illusion. And I may not be correct about this, but it seems to me the capacity to take thought is also what creates the veil, is also what creates the potential for seeming separation. It's like, it's clearly the way that we don't experience everything as one timeless moment that, the mystics point to. We experience past and future because I have an image of myself, eating my salad earlier, and I have an image of myself getting in bed later and falling asleep. And like, I think that that's past and future, but it's actually happening right now. And so, from my perspective, I think that they're inviting us into, it's sort of like a Socratic method way of like inviting us into pondering what they shared before that, which was the, you're not part of a material universe, you're part of a thought. So I think they're just inviting us, or I guess they say that after, inviting us to ponder, what does it mean to take thought? And so often we're identified as the one who is thinking. Like I hear a voice in my head and I think, that was me who just said that. And that's part of the illusion too. That's our freedom to get to be able to see ourselves as separate beings. And we also have the freedom not to, if we choose to see beyond the illusion. So that's some thoughts.
Yeah, Shung, I want to say that I have the same. Every time I read that paragraph, I have the same, I'm like, what does that even mean? Like the words are quite understandable, but somehow it always fuzzes out when I try to like bring it into focus. Like, what are they saying? And what I've come to sort of make of it is I think it's a sort of koan. I mean, I really do think it's a sort of question they're posing that can be returned to just kind of sit with. What is it, my friends, to take thought? And yeah, so I think it's some of these questions that they propose there aren't even necessarily answerable. They're just a doorway into a meditation that we can each, sit with. And yes, I have a yes to what BJ said about like, there's so much more, I think, to thoughts than we tend to realize. And I think that they're kind of like pointing to the depth of, thoughts aren't us, they're not our identity, and they're all part of the original thought. And in my understanding, thought creates everything. The original thought created the universe. The thought of the creator created the universe. And we co-create with our thoughts, and what we hold in our minds, whether it's conscious or unconscious or subconscious, is what builds our actions. It's what builds our lives. Like, our thoughts precede all manifestation. And so the idea of taking thought, it might mean something along the lines of like, we each have interests, we each have desire that's unique to us, but it's part of the creator's desire. And we receive that by the thoughts that show up for us. And I don't know, there's really an endless inquiry, not endless, but there's a really deep inquiry around all of those questions they pose. And I just wanted to say that I'm with you with like, what do they mean? What is it to take thought? And I don't know if it resonates for you, but it's like, well, if you take it as a koan, then you can just relax a little bit and not imagine that there's like an answer. It's an invitation to depth. Okay, so we've got a little stack. Farrellyn?
Well, of course, I'm wondering, what's the original thought? Does anyone have a clue? I mean, I am. And then I've read that the free will is what immediately emerged. So anyway, I'm going back to the very beginning there, if anyone wants to help out.
Anyone want to respond? Thoughts about what is the original thought, Diana?
Sure. I mean, I have no idea really, but I think there's notions of the creator, that original thinker, right? Being sort of at the beginning of everything, but also sort of being the harvest of everything. So in time, the creator's original thought was the first thing that happened. And at the end of time, which doesn't exist, right? Everything that could ever happen is now informing this thought that the creator has. So any way you want to look at it, if you subtract time, to me, the original thought is the thought of everything that there ever could be. And so I completely agree with what BJ said, that our own thoughts, being distortions of the original thought, are going to have omissions. There's going to be missing, things that we have chosen not to see one way or another. And at one point, one clue in the text, I didn't find the quote fast enough, but Ra talks about the power and the purity of the one original thought, in such a way that I think they were indicating that it was the most powerful and the most pure, the truest. So I think that all of our own thoughts are distorted to some degree away from the complete thought that was of everything. That's my take.
Yeah. At this moment, I think it can you hear me?
Mhm.
Oh, at this moment, if I were there, the creator at the beginning, it would be, I am all that is. And then everything spills from there. I am all that is. What more can you say?
Mhm.
Another thought that I have about the one original thought is I think that it's conceiving the possibility for there to be possibilities and for there to be potential, which is somewhat paradoxically, when there's just the one thing, there's no differentiation. And so conceiving of the possibility for there to be differentiation or for there to be possibility creates duality, because in order for there to be, a book, there has to be something that's not a book, and so I think that thoughts are also a way of dividing and separating and creating distinction. And that's the way the mind, the finite mind works. Is through creating distinction. So in a way, the one original thought is the thought of everything, undivided, at least the way that I think of it, and also the potential for there to be division, for there to be infinite possibilities.
That might be the second thought, though. I mean, right after just self-awareness, and then there's a question like, what's next? Or, then
Yeah.
the duality starts, but there has to be an
Yeah.
original point of emergence, I guess. I don't know. It
Yeah.
feels like it.
Well, and I think they talk about the differentiation is the first distortion, which is free will, like taking the option for there to be seemingly more than one is what I think they call the first distortion. That's the way I take it.
Yeah, thank you. Getting clearer.
Cool. So we've got a stack. There's 3 folks with their hands raised. I'll just make
We
a
have
super
Rachel
brief comment.
next.
Yep. Let me just make a
Rachel,
super.
Diana again, and then Steph. And
Yeah, thanks, BJ. Just wanted to make a super brief comment, which is that that question of what is the original thought, in my view, it's the deepest metaphysics possible. So the study of metaphysics, of course, is quite broad and deep, and there's so much mystery to it. And the original thought is the sort of the nexus, the exigent, the beginning of all of it. So it's the most deep metaphysics, the question. So I don't think it's something that we can come to with words, with like a tidy little answer that's going to be like the one and final complete answer. And it's a great inquiry for us to continue to be with. Rachel.
Yeah, I'll be brief. The first thing that I just wanted to say was that for those of us who are starting to study the secret of light, I think that the author, I'm forgetting his name, Walter Cronkite, keeps popping in my head, and I know that's not his name. That is not him, but what's his name? The author,
Walter Russell.
Walter Russell. I know that he goes into some detail about thought, and I'm really curious to read what he says and compare it to the law of one, and what the law of one has to say about thought. The second thing that I wanted to share was, I won't share the experience because we are on a time constraint, but when I was under anesthesia, I had a consciousness experience that involved consciousness. It was just alive, and it was everything, and it was just one thing. It really is I am. Everything after I am is the next, is that point of separation. But yeah, just I think Aaron, you just said something that you can't put it into words. I would say that is an accurate assessment from the experience that I had. The second that we try to explain what it is in words, we've already distorted it. And that's been my understanding. So we can get as close as we can get, but it's something that we won't know until we realize we already are and have that experience. That's all I wanted to share.
Thank you. Steph?
Hi everyone, and this is Bear. He likes to join the call sometimes, so don't mind him. He's just supervising the humans. Yeah, with regards to the original thought, I thought to myself when I was reading it yesterday, it was really interesting. I was at a coffee shop and I was just talking to myself as I was reading things. I don't know, people probably thought I was crazy around me, but it's okay. So what I was thinking is maybe, like, what if we can't, like, what if our bodies and our minds right now, in terms of like the vibration and density that we're at, are not able to handle that? Like, we're not able to handle what that even means. That's like something that I've been just kind of like pondering. And then at some point I was like, yeah, isn't it just like oneness? But then I realized that there are different planets going on too. So like when he says like original thought, like from which planet though is what came up. So I just have more questions than answers, really. And I guess, yeah, my last thing I wanted to ask is, I'm not really sure what he means by was love contained. Like, so I was just wondering if I'm able to like ask that question, because I don't know where we are really. I just wanted to pose the question. There's enough time to respond to that.
Yeah, it's a great question. And if anybody has anything to say, let's invite that, and then let's move on with the reading. But does anyone have any insights about that? Was love contained? What you got,
Yeah.
BJ?
May, I think May
Oh.
raised her hand.
Oh, great.
Thanks. Yeah. So to me, when I feel into was love contained, was love contained, that means, for me, it means, was it held back? Was there a distortion of holding love back? So I'll offer that.
Thanks. BJ?
And for me, you know, I kind of think of approaching, like if we think of like illusion, truth on a spectrum, and we can like approach truth, the closer we get to love, the closer we are to truth, in terms of the truth of no separation, you know, the truth of oneness. And when we're in touch with the truth of oneness, we experience that as love. So I take it to be sort of a key kind of way of assessing the difference between what's illusory and what's more ultimately real.
So based off everything that we've discussed, it sounds to me like Ra is almost talking, so he's implying that your thoughts are almost like a gauge of where you are in terms of your reality. And these questions that he's posing about, like, are your thoughts part of the original thought? Is there love in your thoughts? He's almost like it's a measurement of like where your thoughts reflect where you are in terms of like your spiritual evolution in some sense. That's what I'm sort of getting from this.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Shang. And it's almost like, you know, again, back to like, well, where are they transmitting from? They're transmitting from, you know, sixth density. Their message is the law of one. And I think that when they ask about, when they ask these series of questions, part of what's available is the contrast of like, I think what I, you know, just in my own experience, when I'm thinking, I'm not thinking about unity. I'm not thinking about the original thought, but I do believe it's possible to think in a way that whatever we think about maps back to the one. And I think that's the opportunity that they're sort of hinting at, is that there is a state of being that our thoughts are not, even though they're in some ways distortion, right? They're portions of the one original thought. But I think there's a way that we could think and we could approach our lives that more and more includes that bridge between whatever it is we're thinking about and oneness. And I think that's one of the things that it points to me. And we could just keep talking about this very first one for the rest of our time, but I'd like to move through a little bit more material. So let's move on. And can we have a volunteer to read question 1.1?
I can read.
Great.
Questioner, it seems members of the Confederation have a specific purpose. Is this true with you? And if so, what is your purpose? I'm Ra. We communicate now. We too have our place. We are not those of the love or of the light. We are those who are of the law of one. In our vibration, the polarities are harmonized, the complexities are simplified, and the paradoxes have their solution. We are one. That is our nature and our purpose. We are old upon your planet and have served with varying degrees of success in transmitting the law of one, of unity, of singleness to your peoples. We have walked your earth. We have seen the faces of your peoples. This is not so with many of the entities of the Confederation. We found it was not efficacious. However, when we then felt the great responsibility of staying in the capacity of removing the distortions and powers that had been given to the law of one, we will continue in this until your, shall we say, cycle is appropriately ended. If not this one, then the next. We are not a part of time and thus are able to be with you in any of your times. Does this give you enough information from which to extract our purpose, my brother?
Let's have another reader and let's read through actually no, let's pause there. Let's discuss this for just a few minutes if there's any questions there or comments.
And
Ra's
I
purpose.
specifically want to invite if there's anybody who hasn't spoken, to make sure that you know that your voice is welcome if you'd like to speak.
The one thing that stood out to me that I just want to say about that passage is just like it's so eloquently and beautifully expressed and articulated. I feel so like inspired and moved at times with the way that Ra speaks or translates into language. And so I'm just not going into detail or question about one specific thing, but this is one of those times where I'm just like, oh my gosh, that is so beautiful. Like I'll just bask in that for a while.
Diana?
Two things. Just quickly, I have to say this like on the record, on the video. I know that a few of you here at least know that I helped write the concept guide with Gary. He did the bulk of all of it and I helped edit and kind of rework it. But I don't like, I'm such a neophyte and I don't remember so many details from the Law of One. I just want to say that anything that I say, I'm investigating and learning right now for myself. It's brand new every time I look at it. And I swear I don't remember most of what I did on that book. I mean, I'm sure that I would remember if I went back and read it, but I just have no memory for that stuff. Like I may have been more insightful in the past than I am now, but I'm telling you, I'm no authority on this. Just had to say that. But I was enjoying this passage just 2 days ago, thinking about how the closest we ever get to understanding Ra's gender or lack thereof is in this passage where they say that they're from a place where and time where polarities are harmonized, because gender never comes up again, and Ra never refers to themselves as he or she, but presumably, they're made up of millions of entities who individually have had incarnations across time and space in bodies of all different genders, with enjoying the male and female aspects of polarity through those bodies and incarnations. And we just don't know whether there's a masculine principle at work in the outreach toward us, or whether Ra is kind of like this incredibly balanced entity drawing upon information about both polarities and equally. But I enjoy keeping that in the back of my mind when I read them in general, because I think can be really easy to lean one way or the other. And for me, it kind of can actually skew and bias my orientation toward Ra. So thank you.
Thank you. The one piece I want to clarify, I don't know if this lands for everybody, but when they say we are not those of the love or of the light, what LL research, they put a footnote in later, and they say we are not of the love, we are not those of the love density or of the light density. And what they translate that to mean is that we are not of fourth or fifth density, the love density being fourth density, the light density being fifth density. We are those who are of the law of one, which means they're coming from sixth density. I think that's what that means. Not that they're not loving or into the light. Okay, let's keep reading. Can someone pick up at 1.2?
I'll read. So Ra said, does this give you enough information? Don says, yes, it does. Thank you. Ra, we appreciate your vibration. Is there another query? Questioner, I've heard of the name Ra in connection with the Egyptians. Are you connected with that Ra in any way? I am Ra. Yes, the connection is congruency. May we elucidate? Questioner, please do. Ra, what do you not understand? Questioner, could you give me a little more detail about your role with the Egyptians? I am Ra. The identity of the vibration Ra is our identity. We as a group, or what you would call a social memory complex, made contact with a race of your planetary kind, which you call Egyptians. Others from our density made contact at the same time in South America, and the so-called lost cities were their attempts to contribute to the law of one. We spoke to one who heard and understood and was in a position to decree the law of one. However, the priests and peoples of that era quickly distorted our message, robbing it of the, shall we say, compassion with which unity is informed by its very nature. Since it contains all, it cannot abhor any. When we were no longer able to have appropriate channels through which to enunciate the law of one, we removed ourselves from the now hypocritical position which we had allowed ourselves to be placed in, and other myths, shall we say, other understandings having more to do with polarity and the things of your vibrational complex, again took over in that particular society complex. Does this form a sufficient amount of information, or could we speak further?
That's a good place to pause. Yeah, so any questions or comments about that? Go ahead, Farrellyn.
Could you read that again about where they presented the material, but the priests of the day removed compassion, or they stole the compassion? What was that?
However, the priests and peoples of that era quickly distorted our message, robbing it of the, shall we say, compassion with which unity is informed by its very nature. Since it contains all, it cannot abhor any.
I mean, that's just like organized religion today, right? Not to crap on organized religion, but you know.
That, yeah, I
Yeah.
take it to be similar, that the priests of the time used the material for their own ends, which maybe not necessarily all of them, but you know, used it for gain rather than used it for seeing themselves as one with
Right.
everything.
They created the elite class, and like,
Yeah,
this
I
is
think
our information, and we're better than you are, and come to us for light, and, or, you know, come to us for something that we own.
Yeah, Rachel.
Yeah, I'll be quick again. Yeah, so there's this woman, Laura Atwood. I don't know if any of you are familiar with her. She has a YouTube channel, but she's an author and a journalist, and she studies what she calls the ancient religion of the sun. And her work is really, really fascinating. And there's so many parallels between her work and the Law of One as far as what she's uncovered. She kind of tries to piece together ancient religions that parallel one another in their story and mythologies. And she specifically focuses on ancient Egypt and South America and Scandinavia are the three places that have the most congruency in their ancient teachings. And she ties everything together and tries to, oh, thanks. She tries to create a picture of this ancient religion of the sun that she theorizes originated from Atlantis. But I often ponder the possibility of messengers of the Law of One being the disseminators of this religion that she believes was once global and united all peoples, maybe not geographically, but there's that. And yeah, and I don't know if there any of you share this, but I was obsessed with ancient Egypt as a child. I read not the Law of One. I read the Book of the Dead when I was like 8 years old, and I begged my mom to buy me canopic jars, which she did. And like, I don't know, just that I think that this particular passage, when Ra describes their influence in ancient Egypt, I think that was one of the first things that grabbed me to this material, because I felt like I started to make more sense of the weird obsession I had as a child. Like I just don't know. And, you know, and The Mummy came out around that same time period. So, you know, that movie with Brendan Fraser, and that didn't help my obsession at all. But yeah, I wanted to just share that Laura Atwood, for anybody who likes to delve into other people that might have things to share. She's got 2 books and they're great.
Just
Cool.
a quick note. One of the practices we've had in the past is like, if you share something that's relevant to the study, then we would share it later on, which used to be on our Facebook page, but now in the Telegram topic for Law of One. I bet people would be interested in looking at it if you want to share that link.
Yes,
Yeah.
certainly. I will. Thank you.
Cool.
Yeah, thanks, BJ. That's a great idea. So I just wanted to unpack a little bit of this. And this is, you know, we'll get more into this further into the book, but when they say we spoke to one who heard and understood and was in a position to decree the Law of One, does anyone know who they're talking about?
It was
Akhenaten.
yeah.
Right. That's right, Akhenaten. And that is a fascinating piece of history to to learn about the Amarna period, which was this an anomaly in the whole arc of the dynasties of Egypt. There was this period where Akhenaten was the pharaoh, and he upended the entire power structure and cultural structure of Egypt during his reign. And he decreed the law of one, and they're talking about Akhenaten. And Akhenaten was in touch with Ra. Ra was somehow able to communicate with Akhenaten. And it was a really big deal because the entire system of power and sort of government and religion up till then had a lot to do, as I understand it, had to do with these cults of these different, there was, it was a polytheistic culture. So there's lots of different gods, and the different gods ruled over different portions of reality, the harvest or the rains or fertility or death, or, all these different things. And so the different temples and the different priests that were associated with the different gods and different cults, it was like a whole system of power and hierarchy. And when Akhenaten decreed the law of one and said that there aren't a multitude of gods, there's one God, it was highly disruptive of the power structure. And so, Akhenaten's rule was, I'm not even sure how long, it wasn't very long, maybe even only 17 years or something, or maybe 37 years. I can't remember. But as soon as Akhenaten's power was, reign was over, they reverted back to the polytheistic, all the multiple gods. And those that, those that sort of like, there were some who were close to Akhenaten, maybe. I think the idea was that they just took in the association with Ra, and they turned it into a power game. They're like, we are the official spokespeople. We're the ones you need to go through to get to these teachings, or we're the ones you need to go through to get to the one God, or whatever. And so, yeah, that was the part where it got distorted. Their message got distorted, and it turned into a power, an earthly power game. And then there's this touching part where Ra says, and we're committed to do the best we can to make amends, however we can, to try to undo some of the distortions and add to whatever we can to help clear up the confusion that was caused by our visiting and being in contact with Earth. So that's fast. And it's also fascinating that they're not a part of time. What? They can just be with us in any of our times. I mean, that's profound to me. How would y'all feel about moving on so we can get a little bit further through the material before we have to end? Great. Could someone pick up from question 1.7?
I'll read.
Great.
1.7, questioner. Well, the question was lost because the questioner was sitting too far from the tape recorder to be recorded. And then Ra says, I am Ra. Consider, if you will, that the universe is infinite. This is yet to be proven or disproven, but we can assure you that there is no end to yourselves, your understanding, what you would call your journey of seeking, or your perceptions of the creation. That which is infinite cannot be many, for manyness is a finite concept. To have infinity, you must identify or define that infinity as unity. Otherwise, the term does not have any referent or meaning. In an infinite creator, there is only unity. You have seen simple examples of unity. You have seen the prism, which shows all colors stemming from the sunlight. This is a simplistic example of unity. In truth, there is no right or wrong. There is no polarity, for all will be, as you would say, reconciled at some point in your dance through the mind-body-spirit complex, which you amuse yourself by distorting in various ways at this time. This distortion is not in any case necessary. It is chosen by each of you as an alternative to understanding the complete unity of thought which binds all things. You are not speaking of similar or somewhat like entities or things. You are everything, every being, every emotion, every event, every situation. You are unity. You are infinity. You are love, light, light, love. You are. This is the law of one. May we enunciate this law in more detail? I find that amusing. Questioner.
Actually, why don't you pause there? That's a good place to pause. This will probably be where we stop for the reading. And let's use the time remaining to discuss this last one. It's so juicy.
I know, right?
The floor is open. Comments or questions?
Oh, I would say that I find this like this conversation or like other conversations they have that remind me of my immortality, you know, where it says, um, we assure you that there is no end to yourselves, your understanding, what we call your journey of seeking. I was like, oh God, thank you. Thank you for the reminder of that. I really need that. And then it's interesting about the whole paradox of forgetting constantly or falling back asleep. And just the struggle with the ego that seems to be part of this third density experience, right? And kind of like what we talked about before, was just the whole identification with I. And yeah, I don't know quite what to do about that. I don't know what to be, you know, maybe it's just like, you said this one time, Aaron, a while back, and it always stuck with me too. It's like something about acceptance, you know, like how key acceptance is instead of trying to have my ego identity wrong or not like it, or maybe perpetuate suffering because, you know, I'm not always experienced that deep sense of oneness that I know. I've experienced it before profoundly, but I think I probably, if I stayed in that sort of rapture all the time, I probably wouldn't get anything done and life would be very short or something. Um, but yeah, anyway, so I'll just say that much. Acceptance.
Yeah. One of the pieces that stands out to me, and it's similar to what you're pointing to, Scott, is like, you know, why am I still seeming so separate? You know, even when I've touched that oneness, you know, and I've touched that that deep truth before. And yeah, one of the pieces that really stands out to me is in the third paragraph. There is no polarity, for all will be, as you would say, reconciled at some point in your dance through the mind body spirit complex, which you amuse yourself by distorting in various ways at this time. And some of y'all know that what I do professionally is like, well, basically what the Inquiring Together call is about, and which is like facilitating a meditative self-inquiry experience. And a lot of times working with clients, they'll be like, but why am I so stuck on this thought? Like, I know that that's not true. And what's often underneath of it is like, there's something that we still like. There's something that we still appreciate. There's something that we're getting from the story. And there's like some form of amusement that we're not seeing. And it just tickles me that they just come right out and say it. You amuse yourselves. And it's like, no, I don't. I hate it. But oh yeah, there's something that I kind of like about it because I'm getting something out of it.
Yeah, thanks, BJ. Anyone else want to comment, or should we try to squeeze one or two more Q&As in?
Yeah, you know, when they say in truth, there is no right or wrong, there is no polarity, blah, blah, blah. And then, you know, that just, you know, I just want to, there's the part of me that is in that space of separation, just wants to flip the bird, to be quite honest, because that's how it feels. And I say a lot of times to, whenever I'm in meditation, you all up there, come down here and you figure out how to live this life and how, in the times whenever I feel really triggered, I'm like, all right, you all come here and do this. See how you deal with it. So it was kind of funny. I yield.
That's so funny because it feels to me like you're just talking to yourself when you say that, May. Like, because you are
May,
here.
come on down here and figure
You
it
did
out.
come down here to have that experience and figure it out. Now you're doing it. Maybe. Farrellyn?
Yeah, just real quick. I often find myself saying I have a bone to pick with God, and I know when I cross over, someone's going to hand me a bone. Ha ha ha. And Abraham Hicks, the Abraham conglomerate says, or Esther's always saying, you have no idea how much fun you're having, down here in the density. Yeah.
Yep. Amanda?
I recently had this really delightful vision that came to me. And it was all of us as young children around 5 years old on a playground. And we were all playing a make-believe game. Like, okay, you be the mommy, you be the daddy. Okay, you can be the sister. And oh, and you're going to say this one thing that's going to be really bad. Oh, and you're going to be the mean sister. And we were just like playing this great big make-believe game as like 5 and 6 year olds. And it really like, it was just so awesome and so beautiful because I knew that when the game was over, like we all really believed it when we were playing it. And then when we stepped off the playground, the game didn't exist anymore, but we were all like so excited for our characters, even if we were like the mean character or the princess or the mommy or the daddy. It was really awesome. So I just want to share that.
Mm-hmm. I love that analogy.
Just want to put a plug for the book called Little Soul in the Sun, which I'll also share in the thread. It's like it's the same as what you're just talking about. It's really cool.
The part of the quote or the part of this reading of there is no right or wrong, boy, that speaks so deeply to me and to my I feel like what I'm here to explore in this lifetime, like sort of like when I try to track my incarnational patterns and incarnational lessons, like what did I come here to learn about? I'm sure that I came here to learn about right and wrong. Like it's such a deep theme for me. And I'm still pretty tangled up in it. But pretty early on in my seeking, I had some really deep and profound experiences of, understanding what lies beyond the perspective of right and wrong, and like the profound peace available there. And yeah, I notice I'm so interested in like, how do we make sense of the ideas of right and wrong and good and evil, and how do we respond, and what are the what are the threads of human thought and the currents of human thought, and how they how we grapple with this idea of right and wrong. And I think it's one of the big reasons why I'm so touched by and moved by and attracted to the Law of One, because it presents a story, a cosmology of how it can be that we both, the paradox of we certainly have the relative experience that there's good and bad things in our lives, and then there's good people and there's evil people, there's good deeds and evil deeds, but how it can all be a part of this unified larger thing that isn't separated, that doesn't actually hold that view. It's all part of this infinite, experience that the creator is having. Anyway, it's just such an elegant and sophisticated way to resolve that paradox that's so tangly to me, but I'm also so interested in. I love that reminder. Sean?
I just wanted to add to that. The guy who wrote The Little Soul in the Sun, he wrote like the Conversations with God series, and the first book, I think one of the most memorable phrases was he said like Hitler goes to heaven, and I remember the first time I read that, I was like, what do you mean Hitler went to heaven? And like I think that's very much in line with what Ra is talking about here, of like everything in the end gets unified. It's all part of one original thought. There's no, you can only end up with the creator. There's no other way. It's just a matter of, I think he says like some people take longer than others, but in the end, everyone goes back to the creator.
Yeah, that's right. I have
share.
one housekeeping piece I'll say in a moment if anyone's, but if anyone else wants to say anything, please go ahead.
Yeah, it just few years back, I was exploring the Orthodox Christian Church, not to convert, just seeking and exploring and challenging my own judgments towards dogma. And I was having a conversation with the priest who was explaining to me how God sent, and this is, of course, through the Orthodox, very polarity driven narrative, but I found a lot of wisdom in what he said. And he was describing how God knew what was going to happen, and it wasn't an accident that he sent man and Satan to the same place, Earth. And he said, Satan in his pride believes he's separate from God. And in his pride, he doesn't realize he's still doing the work of God. And at the end, through man, the devil will be reconciled and will be redeemed through our experience of knowing and learning about good and evil. And I thought there was a piece of wisdom there. I don't know if I understood it the way he intended for me to understand it, but the way that I understood it ended up being kind of along the lines of what we're saying is that through our understanding of good and evil, we can redeem whatever is separating us, whatever, we can kind of redeem the illusion, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
I'll be quick. I forget when and where I was reading this, but it basically talked about service to self path, that I forget if it was fifth or sixth density. It branches off, like we have the choice, and there's like a fork. And on one branch, it's service to others, and then we meet back at the top. Service to self branches off and goes this way, and we are still working through third, fourth, fifth, all the way up into sixth density, I believe. And it basically service to self, the negative path, they end up in a sense like a black hole, and they implode. That the soul can't continue to feed itself, like it continues to feed itself until it gets to fifth, sixth density, and then it literally like implodes and goes back to creator. So there was like this visual branch of where at sixth density there's no more evolution, you just end up a black hole and you implode and go back to creator, and you have to start all over. So and that was law of one something somewhere, I forget. It was one of the links, but that
They said
I had
that
a very
at sixth density, they voluntarily switched back to positive because they realized that negative has too much inherent entropy. So there's no negative at high sixth density.
Right, that they turn into a black hole and implode and then end up at creator and start again.
Yeah. All right, friends. So we are a little bit past time. So I just want to make one closing remark, which is my intention is we'll do one session per call. And I know that there's a part of the reading we didn't get to, but you know, if you've already read it and you have questions, or if you want to go ahead and try to read it on your own, if you have any questions that come up, just pop them in the Law of One thread on Telegram. And you can write it out, or you can do those. There's a little button that you can push and just make a little video, and it makes it real easy to just like, okay, so this is what I'm thinking, you know, and just pop a little video of yourself asking a question, and we can continue the discussion in between the sessions. So that's my intention, is we'll just use that forum to field any questions we weren't able to make it to on the call. So hopefully that works. So next week we will be doing session 2.
Do you want to share about office hours too?
Well, I haven't figured out a date yet. My intention is I'm going to be doing a Zoom call, pop-in Zoom call sometime during the week, where anybody who wants to can just pop in and ask questions, and we can just informally chat about either the Law of One or the Secret of Light, or anything else that's geeky and metaphysical and fun to talk about. But I have to figure out a time for that yet, and I will be announcing that soon. Probably over the next week, I'll have figured out a time for that, and that'll be another opportunity for you to get some opportunity, someone else to talk to about your questions. Not like I'm an expert either. I appreciated what Diana said. I'm also just a student of this, although a very, very passionate one. So
We
okay.
appreciate that you make yourself available.
It's a joy to me. I love talking about the Law of One. It's my favorite thing. Well, thank you all for your presence. Thank you for your contributions.
Thanks
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
We are complete. We'll see you around.
See you next week.
Yep. Bye-bye.